When I made my first reflections video, a whole 1 year ago, I had meant for these videos to be an opportunity to talk about my accomplishments and my mistakes on this channel, as well as my intentions for the new year. That won't be happening this year because, truth is, I haven't been thinking about the channel much at all these past several months. There's no way to skirt around this, so I may as well put it front and center. Meeting Ethel has changed my life. If you want to understand how, well, you have to understand where I was at before we met. For that, I have to give a content warning for abuse, neglect, isolation, and ableism. I'll also be touching on suicide. Something about Ethel made me open up. That's where all this began. I have a really hard time opening up because for most of my life, something bad would happen every time I did. I remember my primary school vice principal trying to tell me that my very clear signs of depression weren't anything to do with the abuse I was dealing with at home, but a result of poor weather and the beginnings of puberty. When I told my high school psychologist point blank that I thought my mother was abusive, she tried to tell me it was boy trouble. As for my mother herself, I learned at a fairly young age that trying to talk to her would only get me hurt. What's worse is, as I got older, my mother started leaning on me more and more for emotional support. By the time I was 16, she was spending as many as 5 hours a day, dumping every little thing on me, from the moment I got home from school to the moment I went to bed. Even things she'd already talked about, she would talk about again, just so she could keep talking. This was all after I had been diagnosed with severe anxiety and severe depression. Once I made the mistake of trying to set a boundary. I told her that I couldn't be a therapist for her and that she needed to talk to a professional. It wasn't long before she was dumping every little thing onto me and telling me what her therapist had said about it. Those experiences with my mum were particularly unhealthy. They taught me to always be there for other people, no matter how much I was struggling myself. They also taught me to associate opening up and venting with pain and violence. That's a deadly combination at the best of times, but especially after going a whole lifetime without support. I found that even after I made friends, even after I had people in my life who wanted to support me, it amounted to very little. They didn't know how to help, and I didn't know how to ask. Ethel helped a lot with that. She made me feel safe and loved in a way that I'd never felt before. At one point, she told me that she felt the need to check in on me every now and then, and that there was no expectation to be happy all the time. I can't overstate how impactful that was. I felt like someone had made time and space for me. The problem with that is, it doesn't take long for the sadness to set in. That love gave me the perspective to understand how deeply wrong my life had been up to that point. I was starting to realize the depths of the apathy and the depravity, honestly. It must have taken for no one to help me with everything I was being put through as a child, even after I started crying for help. I had known something was wrong for a while, but I didn't understand until I got that glimpse into what life could have and should have been like. Then the pandemic happened. We had to isolate for 3 months. The longest I'd ever gone in near complete isolation was 2 months, and that had done permanent damage every time. I didn't know how to put it into words at the time, but I was terrified that by the time I came out of a 3-month isolation, there would be nothing left. Ethel didn't know anything beyond that I was struggling, but that was enough. At least once a week, they would call me up and just be there for hours, a whole evening, so that I wouldn't be alone. They would check in on me and offer to call just in case it was too hard for me to reach out. Sometimes, I wonder if I would be here if not for them. It was a lot to process. It still is. She would offer me assurances that we had plenty of time, that she wasn't going anywhere. I didn't even know it was something I needed to hear until she said it. No one else seemed concerned, so I internalized that hanging on by a thread was normal. I didn't know how to notice my own pain and fear. It hurts to think how long it took for someone to say that to me, because I may not be perceptive, but I am also not a good actor. You can tell I'm still working through a lot of trauma, but it hasn't all been bad. One thing that really struck me when I was getting to know Ethel was this feeling like we had a common language. It was like I had met someone from a culture I hadn't been part of since I was very young. I think it's at least partly because she's visibly autistic. Almost all of my friends are autistic, but they're about as good at masking as I am, or better. Ethel, though, they're not so different from how I might have turned out if the pressure to be normal hadn't crushed my spirit. Since meeting Ethel, I've started to get in touch with parts of myself that I didn't know I had. It's been a bittersweet experience. It feels like being brought to life after 20 years of undeath. There's the sense of calm as well. For my whole life, I've been the only person I could trust. It's exhausting and scary having to keep yourself safe from the people who are supposed to take care of you, especially when you're too young to recognize when you're in danger, much less protect yourself from it. Those dynamics don't magically go away once you become an adult either. Ethel couldn't fix a problem that big, but they did help. A lot. They treated my safety as a bare minimum standard rather than a lofty goal to aspire to. When I realized that I finally had a safe place, it was a huge weight off my shoulders. It's an understatement to say I've had a lot to think about this year. All of this has made me think about what I want out of life. Before, everything I wanted boiled down to wanting the pain to stop. Now, I want to be happy. I want to thrive now that I've had a taste of what that feels like. This channel doesn't really fit into that plan. When I think about why I started this YouTube channel, I realize it's only because I felt like I was supposed to. I grew up watching YouTube. In fact, secular YouTube in specific was how I filled the void caused by the isolation and the neglect. It gave me education, company, and comfort when no one else would. So, having a YouTube channel seemed to me like the best possible thing I could do. Paradoxically, my experiences have made it really hard for me to make and share content. Something I started to notice this year, though it's been happening for a very long time, is that my mother won't respond to anything I have to say if it doesn't interest her. She isn't dismissive. She literally will not respond. It's like I don't exist. Having that sense of worthlessness reinforced every single day has gotten me to a point where I physically cannot share things with people. Sometimes I'll lose the ability to speak. Part of the reason why my uploads take so long is because so many of my ideas feel so pointless. Why am I telling people this? Who in their right mind would want to hear about it? I'm trying to work past the judgment and the self-doubt, but it's so ingrained at this point that brainstorming in my head comes with the same anxiety as putting a pen to paper. The only thing it seems I can do unhindered is explain myself, like I've been brought before a tribunal. Maybe I can use that to my advantage? I've thought about abandoning this channel a few times. It's tempting to focus on working for Essence of Thought exclusively. I don't have the time or the energy for my own channel. Do I? No, I don't, but I do still have things to say sometimes. I need my own voice. I made this channel for all the wrong reasons. Just look at Lily Orchard. I thought of my videos on her as a distraction from my usual content, to correct a single mistake from my past, but no, Lily was my primary influence starting out. I was trying to be a toxic, hateful banshee like her. Not only that, but my videos defending her were how I got my start. When I denounced her, I was denouncing everything my channel was built on. Well, almost everything. Did I ever tell you why I started out with a Leviathan? It was because of the alt-right convincing me that the only way to avoid abuse on the internet, as a man, was to be masculine, domineering, and irreverent. There wasn't room for me to be happy, or cute, or sincere. The secular community, Lily Orchard, and the alt-right. That was what I started with. I made this channel for all the wrong reasons. But that gives me all the more reason to push forward. I started with a mistake, but I'll be damned if I'm going to end that